Hello, this is Ron with Rising Sun Properties. Today we're talking with Mr. Jeremy Smith. Jeremy is one of our clients. He goes into some depth about his experience buying in Japan and what to look for, how to research and everything that he put into it and finding his property here in Japan. He's a really good example of what you should do when you're looking at purchasing in Japan. Thank you very much for your time, Jeremy, and for the interview. And check out his website, Standard and Strange. I talk about it in the interview and give a link below. And here's a quick view of Nagoya. This is from our office here in Sakai. Thank you very much. And without further ado, here's Jeremy. So today I'm joined with Mr. Jeremy Smith. Jeremy contacted me online looking for some properties here in Japan. So we wanted to talk a little bit about his experience, how we found each other and how we've been working together. So how are you?
Doing well today.
Great.
I've been in country now for 6 days, I think. No more jet lag. Feeling sharp and rested finally.
Great. So yeah, I think we originally had a meeting on Sunday and then on Tuesday we met or something like that, right?
Yeah, I was still in the US, I think. And
it was Monday in Japan.
Yeah. Jumped on a video call, and then I think Thursday we went out looking at houses.
That's right.
Quick turnaround. Got 4 houses knocked out that day, and I think it only took us 4 hours.
Yeah, luckily they all had key boxes, so that made things easier. So why don't we start by just introducing yourself, kind of a little bit about your background and why you are wanting to buy here in Japan.
So I own a clothing store, Standard and Strange. Most of our business is in Japanese clothing. We're importing top tier Japanese brands like Capital, Real McCoy's, Rolling Dub Trio, and so on. And part of the reason that I want to move to Japan is that the exhibition schedule, which is when I go and I look at the next season's worth of product, is no longer on any kind of regular cadence. So I have to come here almost monthly sometimes, and that's getting to be a bit burdensome. The other thing driving it is I plan to move to Japan in 5-6 years, but with the yen weak, the dollar strong, and generally the cost of living in the US, figured might as well go now. And from there, it was a matter of figuring out where do we want to live, my family and I, what's our budget, and how do we structure being able to live here in terms of visa and all the other moving parts.
Okay. Yeah, and a lot of people that I speak to, initial calls, don't really think about that. A lot of people think, I just buy a property, that means I can get a visa in Japan, which is definitely not true.
I think that's the first question that gets knocked down in every Reddit thread, every Facebook thread is, no, you don't get a visa with your house.
Yeah. And, I just want to talk a little bit about the ideal way for you as a buyer to work with an agent and the ideal buyer for me to work with on the agent side. So what has been your experience and finding an agent and starting the process of researching, viewing, and ultimately hoping to buy?
So I got pulled into the idea that a house in Japan was affordable from Instagram, from things like Cheap House Japan, Akiya Mart, and there's a few other folks out there that show different houses around Japan that are both affordable and from a distance look aesthetically very good shape. So I started with that, and I started making inquiries with those companies and looking at their pricing and trying to figure out if they're offering any value. From there, it was a matter of digging into Reddit, Facebook, anywhere I could find more information talking about what was the experience working with any of these companies like. And in the more I dug, the more names turned up, and there's individuals out there who assist. There's people who are not realtors. There are people who are realtors. It can get kind of confusing. What it comes down to is budget and how much work are you willing to do in locating the house. Do you want it done for you type of thing, or do you want to be much more hands-on about your search? Do you want to be on a plane every 2 weeks, or do you want to see a bunch of videos and then come out? And there's also time pressures to be aware of, because houses sometimes, the desirable ones in urban areas, gone before you can even be there. 'Cause it seems like the major listing sites, some of those houses are ghosts, you know. And that was another part of it, is digging up all of the Japanese real estate sites, which ones are top level aggregators. Like I think Nifty is one, and you have to look those up. But being able to go right to the source rather than relying on a different, Akiya Mart has an aggregator, but that's not every single listing. And even the listings on Sumo or My Nifty, I can't remember the name of it, but even those don't go all the way down. You need a realtor for that who has access to one of the major systems, something like Rains or the others, and they can help dig up property that's not listed that can meet your spec.
Yeah, and I love that you know what Rains is. Rains is a online system you only have access to if you have a license. You're a licensed realtor. Of course, we are a licensed realtor. So people that know that name, I'm like, okay, these people have obviously done their research, because you're not going to find that information just, casually looking online. So from my side as the agent here in Japan, I mean, you are the ideal customer because you're someone who is doing the research, not just skimming things. You're doing the deep dig. This is a big move. You have a lot of experience in Japan. You've been here a lot over the last, like 20 years or something?
10 to 12 years
10
now.
10 to 12 years.
Which is something I would interject too, is before anyone makes this decision to buy a house, if you're planning on using it as a vacation home and come here, you get 180 days a year, I think, on a tourist visa. That's one thing. But if you're planning on living here full time, it's not something I would ever recommend to someone who hasn't been at least 5-6 times, or for someone who hasn't gotten outside of a major city, or gotten away from sort of tourist life, because there's a very different world outside of Tokyo, Osaka, Kyoto, that you have to be aware of to really make the move successful.
Mm-hmm. And thank you for that, because that's what I tell people all the time. They're like, well, I've never been to Japan. Which area do you recommend? And I'm like, no, I would rather not. I don't want to have the responsibility of telling people where to go. You need to come to Japan and have the experience yourself and know the areas, right? Thank you.
I mean, in that sense, you're never going to be able to go and visit every part of Japan before you choose where to live, but you can do enough research and enough travel in a limited amount of time to get a sense of an area. And also you can, climate records are easy to find. All the things that you need to know to make a decision are there, because, first I wanted to live in Hokkaido, but looking at the winter, it's not particularly cold winter, but the amount of snow, the isolation is kind of untenable. And, you see a lot of places for sale in Niigata, which is fine, but, I went there, it wasn't for me. And I've probably been to a dozen or more Japanese cities and got a sense for what I liked. And then I stopped looking after I found an area I was interested in, rather than giving myself some kind of horrible selection anxiety by going to every single major city and every single prefecture.
Yeah, so you've done the research, not even just like the area, the climates, like what's going to be comfortable for you and your family. The homes itself, okay, this is what I want in a home. This is my budget range. This is the amount I want to keep for renovations. This is the area. Here's the listings. All that research. Also, looking into different agencies. I always tell people when they're the first ones, we're the first company that they talk to. What other agencies have you looked into, right? Because I always recommend look what's out there. Just don't settle on us. Look around, see what people are saying. Make your decision after you've talked to 3, 4, 5 plus different people. If you feel like we're the best ones after that, then I'd be happy to move forward. But I love people who do their research, do a lot of digging, and I'm not the one. With our first conversation, there was basically no education, as I would say, from my end. This is like, this is our services, this is what we do. You're like, this is what I want, this is what I found. I'm like, wow, this is perfect. Probably the easiest buyer, so one of the easiest buyers so far that I've had to work with, because you come knowing what you want, right?
That is something to really work out this is my third trip looking at homes. I was lucky that the home that I really wanted was the first home I looked at my first trip. I just kind of struck gold on that one. But even then, going and looking at a dozen, 15 more, sort of educated me on what is the inside of a Japanese home that was built 10, 20, 30 years ago look like. What are the quality of these, what kind of quality you're getting out of who built the house? Because the newer ones, you can figure out who the builder is, and some of them, they've got paper walls. They're not. They can look great in a photo and a video, but they're in quite poor condition when you tour them. And even price range won't tell you, because some are priced for land. So I'm buying in Kobe, and I found things in the inner wards that look great on paper, but touring them, it was clear that I was paying for the property or for the land, not the building. Like these were, as we say in the US, these were teardowns, almost uninhabitable homes.
Yeah, and to be honest, most of the value in Japan is in the land, right? There's not a lot of value in the home overall, but especially on older homes that need to be torn down, basically, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's something I would say too, is like, worry about location first and then home quality after that, especially if you have budget. A new home here costs what now, 250 grand to build, I think. You just go down, basically you go to the house store, you point at one, and they have a 60-day guarantee that they'll tear down the old one, take everything away, put the new one in. Foreign buyers can't finance it, but if you're liquid enough, you can always do that if you find great location and lousy structure. Mm-hmm. There's definitely places I looked at where it's like, I would love to live right here. I cannot afford to buy. I can't afford to knock that down right now and rebuild it.
As far as searching for an agent and settling on one and your communications, what has that been like for you?
So the first thing I did there was, again, just scoured everything I could find on the internet, digging into the companies that are all over Instagram, digging into every Reddit thread I could find, finding other combinations of search terms on Google to try to look under every stone, getting on Facebook and finding the Facebook groups for buying houses in Japan, pretty much anywhere I could get information, and creating a long list of people who are doing this kind of service for foreigners. And I do recommend working with an agent, a realtor who is, able to work with an American or European, because most of the buyer's agents here won't be able to speak English, or you won't be able to get in touch because you don't have a Japanese phone number, or there's a lot of barriers. So, eliminating all of that makes it easy. Then you're down to maybe a dozen, 15 choices that I found. And then it was just a matter of setting up meetings, doing a lot of video calls, figuring out, everyone has a different price range. There's a couple folks who are very boutique, and they'll do things like go out and they'll run a drone over the building. They'll do pretty much everything remotely for you before you even visit. But the numbers on that are pretty expensive. That's if you're looking for, a ready turnkey luxury level home, down to individuals who will just help you communicate with a realtor. So there's just tiers on tiers, and it was just a matter of getting on the phone, getting on video calls, and talking to people until I found, somebody I was comfortable working with, somebody who understood my needs and could also match, who could take the spec I was asking for and dig up houses within that spec, rather than expecting that I just go and find the homes and hand over a list. Because half of the battle too is there's all the homes you don't see listed anywhere. Being able to get access to those is a big deal. Of course, part of this too is just reading reviews of people's experiences with different companies, and it really is a matter of getting 10, 15 different opinions. You need to take this like meta survey of what everyone thinks about each realtor. So you're not, one person can have one bad experience, but 10 people could have a good experience. Just research. It's not, none of it is you can't just see a house on Cheap Houses Japan on Instagram and say, I want that one. It's not anywhere that simple. You have to be willing to invest. I put in, at this point we're in June. So I put in 8 months on this search, and I'm about to close on something, but it was, an hour, 2, 3 hours a day of research sometimes just to figure out all of the moving parts and how it fit into my needs, my life, where I am, my age, all of it. Like, how is that all going to come together? And that's going to impact what realtor you want to use too. If you're fairly wealthy, there's people you can just turnkey, get push button, get house kind of situation. If you're more hands-on like me, Ron's ideal to work with in that sense because I did a lot of the work in advance. I'd already visited homes. I knew what I was looking for. I knew where I wanted to be. I knew the wards of Kobe really well. It was a lot easier to just hand over a spec and say, this is what I'm looking for. Here's 4 or 5 examples. Let's go.
I didn't even know you'd done that much research on other realtors, and one thing to keep in mind, which I think you learned, is some people, I'm not going to say they're going to lie to you, but they're not an actual licensed agent when maybe you think they are, right? So that's something to always ask. And those kind of folks and companies to work for are absolutely fine, but you just need to know that up front.
Yeah, you should. It is a question to ask if you find someone in a lower price tier, if they're really just acting as a go-between, if they're just leveraging language skill, that is another option you can look at too, is just finding somebody who can be your interlocutor between you and a buying agent if you want to come in at a low end. But the issue there is if you need to put the hammer down, really drive a deal quickly. I have a cutoff date when I need to move, and so I need an aggressive realtor. I need somebody who's going to be on top of the seller's agent and pushing the deal along and getting, not necessarily on my terms, but sort of answering my questions immediately or knowing what the answers will be. Things like, can this deal be negotiated? Should this deal be negotiated? There's a lot of moving parts. And oftentimes the folks you find that are just sort of helpers to the deal won't be able to put the hammer down the same way to just get through the red tape, get through often the reluctance of, because buyer's agents in Japan, seller's agents, they don't have a lot of financial motivations. I think they only make a couple $1,000 off a deal, unlike the US where they get points from a deal.
Sure, and it is just having access to a licensed real estate agent. Of course, I personally don't have the license. Hide, our president, does, but I know the business. I work under that and have access to that through our company. We know the business. We know what questions to ask. We know what to look for immediately. A lot of things like negotiations aren't even possible unless you are the licensed real estate agent. So if you're just working with a broker who's working with them, then it's an extra step, and it could be, especially if you're on a timeline, which you always are, of course, especially living in America, and things can go very quickly being sold. You want things to move as quickly as possible, right?
And I had a deal starting to go sideways. I thought I was done getting on a plane, and I had to turn around 5 days and come back to sort things out. So having, and I switched teams over to Ron's team, things got a lot easier. But, your team, choosing the right team can save you $10,000. Because last second tickets can be quite expensive. You'd be looking at, $1,500, $2,000, $3,000 very quickly. And, one mistake and you're back out here, you lose a week of work. It's not particularly expensive to stay here, but the plane tickets will kill you, and then jet lag.
Yeah. Well, and to be honest, a lot of people that we work with buy remotely, right? Maybe I mentioned this to you before, but I'd say like 70 plus, almost 80% of the people we work with don't even see the home in person. They kind of rely on me to be the eyes and ears here. If you have the means to and want to, of course, we do have our clients who definitely want to see it in person. Yeah. That's completely fine. And when you're in that situation, you definitely want to be working with the right agent, right?
Because the details, I'll say this after looking at all these homes, is there's a lot where on paper, the photos, the videos, they look fantastic. And then you get in there and what looks like a little water stain is a wall that's about to go. What looks like maybe a kitchen that's got a little age on it is going to have to go in the trash. You're going to need a new kitchen. There's a million small details that you're not going to catch unless you have someone trusted on the ground looking. And even then, if I had chosen to go remote with you, I still would have said, okay, go tour, find me a bunch of houses. Here's some that I want, dig up some, go look yourself. And then I want to see the top 4 in person. Because there's always still a question, for at least for me, my family, there's always a question of like, is it, even if it's in great shape, is it the right fit? Is it the right, inside, what are the inside spaces like? How does it feel? What's the light actually like in person? And it's worth the plane, it's worth the plane ticket. You're gonna be living this thing for a long time. And, it's not, if it's not a vacation home, it is not a minor purchase. And, and part of that too is it's not particularly easy to resell the home. If you move here and you're like, well, I hate this house, well, you need to have another batch of money lying around to go buy a different one, because it's not, US market, you can buy your next house, unload your old house pretty quick. Here, one of the things I thought about heavily coming to the process was, whatever I buy, I'm stuck with it for at least 2 to 5 years minimum. And I'd rather not have to move again. Rather just move. At least the location would be ideal. Preferably the house is ideal, and not have to do anything.
Sure. And again, just doing your research and knowing that and knowing what you're getting into, it's fantastic. You might be the most well-educated buyer that I've worked with.
Well, some of that too is the privilege of having done business here and stayed at my friends' houses, and through that also seen a lot of other people's homes, apartments, and kind of like, what are these spaces that other people live in? What do they look like? How do they feel? To just kind of set the bar at, what am I comfortable with?
Sure.
And what is, a typical Japanese home look like once it's full of furniture and stuff? And, it's got the shelves up, the books, the pictures, because that really changes the entire dynamic.
Yeah. And to go back, you were saying about having an agent that can help you search for properties, much like yourself. I always say I 100% want our clients to come with a list on their own, because to me that means they've done the research, they know what area, and they know what's within the reality of their budget and what they want, right? So if they're like, oh, I have $5,000 US, what should I buy? That's the worst case scenario.
I think that's the answer is, you should buy
not much. You should
maybe. That's a case of think of a side job for a minute and then come back with 10 to 20.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there are those cheap properties out there, but it's nothing you want to buy.
Actually, I shouldn't say that, because it's also a sliding scale of age, ability. If I was 21 and didn't have a family, yeah, I'll take a free home in the middle of a city and rebuild it myself. Like I think there's some Swedish guy doing this in Tokyo. Or I'll take a $5,000 property.
Anton.
Yeah. No, I'll take a $5,000 property and live in a tent and tear it down.
I met Anton. I think I told you I met Anton. Great guy, personally. Yeah.
I love his channel. It's a thing. It's something you can do, and it's. So I'm not saying don't go for it, but you've got to align what you want to do. I've owned an old house in the U.S. I know that it's a never-ending struggle. So it's like, do you want this to be your hobby, or do you want to do other things in your life?
Yeah. Like I always say, it's cheap and not bought for a reason, because nobody wants it. There's no value. It's like, oh, it's been on the market for 2 years. Not surprised, right?
So I should say, one thing that was super educational for us is when we came here in December. Again, I'm fairly privileged to say I own a business that takes me here. I can work from anywhere in the world. So I came with my family for a couple weeks in December, and we, through Airbnb, got a bunch of different houses that we stayed in for a few days. Like a newer build, I think is probably within, is a stock builder home, probably 20 years old. And we stayed in a true akiya, a kaminka, which was miserable in the middle of winter in Gifu.
Oh God, that must have been so cold.
Yeah, it was brutal. It was.
Yeah.
We actually wound up changing after 2 days because it was so much colder than we possibly could have imagined.
I lived in one of those houses for like 4 years here in Nagoya. I loved it. I like the cold, but it's like you can feel the wind coming through those homes, right?
I think if we'd been prepared, it was also a situation where the weather forecast had said one thing. We came as 15 degrees Fahrenheit colder.
Oh.
So that was kind of a issue. But then just seeing this Kaminka that had already had a ton of work done to it and still had soft floors, and you could see it still had a lot more work to go. But Airbnb is a very efficient way to check out regions, check out different kinds of home, and kind of dial in your expectations of what you're going to get when you purchase something. And more than just touring it, you're actually living in one that's functioning. And on the same trip, at the end, I got lucky and found an Airbnb in Kobe that was a full custom build. I think they said it cost 60 million yen for the land and the build, and probably the nicest house I've ever been in.
Is that the one we drove past?
The black one?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a crazy custom build that was absolutely perfect. I actually even asked them if I could buy it, but their selling price was out of my budget. If it had been, I would have bought it in a second, because it was like, that family had the same interests we do. It had studio space, and a room for our kid. It had room for a garden. It was just like 100% dialed in, but also 100% out of my budget.
Yeah. I mean, that's great. Peter and Peter, I'll link their interview too. They bought in Atami. They said the exact same thing, which is great. It's like, if you really are interested and want to know what it's like to live in one of these kind of homes, get the Airbnb. You'll live there, and you'll probably realize it's not the place that I want, because, like you said, if it's Airbnb ready, then it's at the best condition it could probably be at that time. And if it's still not good enough, then chances are it's not going to be a good fit for you.
Yeah. And a lot of that is too just being able to go through the day-to-day things of like, what is, modern houses have what's called a system kitchen. What's that like? What do you need? An oven? Do you want a dishwasher? Do you want an induction cooktop? All of these little things do add up. Even like, I'm down to the point where I'm looking at bathroom type, and the modern bathrooms have a dryer function for your clothing, so you can hang your stuff up and it'll dehydrate and dry overnight. And I built that into my budget to add if I found to a house that doesn't have it. Living in one of these spaces for 2, 3, 4, 5 days, you'll learn very quickly what you want and don't want in a home. It's like, do you want to deal with Japanese stair pitch, which is kind of terrifying? Do you want to what are you willing to deal with in terms of quality of appliances, bathrooms, kitchens, layouts? Are you going to be particularly upset about low doorways until you can change them? There's, a very long list of things to get acquainted with. And early on, I think it might have been one of my first trips to Japan, we got really lucky, and someone was renting their grandfather's home in Kyoto from the early 1900s, and it was one of those places that can never be torn down. It's protected, but the door frames were all about here on me.
Mm-hmm.
And
you're like 6'1", 6'2"?
6'2".
Yeah.
And I knocked myself out twice in there, out cold, because I forgot.
No.
Yeah. Just like walk.
Out cold?
Yeah. Hit the deck, gone for
dang.
30 seconds.
That's dangerous.
Yeah. Just there's so much to really dig into. This is not, again, I keep saying it's not trivial, which is why you need a good partner who can walk you through these things. But again, someone can't really walk you through things if you don't do the homework.
Absolutely. Again, thank you for doing all that kind of research, because it's just fantastic. Again, you have a bit of a different situation compared to most people being able to come here so often for your job, which is great. We're here in Nagoya right now. You're in our office in Sakai, so we met in Kobe, and I think you've been around doing some other business. So it's great that you get to come to Japan and see these things firsthand, because some people don't have that opportunity to do so.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely wouldn't say, I would say absolutely do not, if you've not been to Japan, buying a house sight unseen in a country you've never been to is not a smart move.
I agree 100%. And, of course, we want to sell homes, but I would never pressure sales. And I think you could probably get that feeling from the way we do business. It's not like we're trying to pressure sales. I want a home in Japan. I've never been there. Great. We can help you out. I'm always like, no, that's a bad idea. First, do these things. And exactly what you're saying.
Yes, I would say at least 2 trips minimum before making a decision to live here. Because and this is more of a cultural sidebar, but I've spent a lot of time around the internet looking at various on Reddit, and finding these trends and people I've met here, and sort of like who's content and happy after buying a house here and who isn't. What are the personality types? Is it for me? And for me, the answer is yes. I understand what it means to live here, all of those things. And the people who seem unhappy came here after one very fun vacation. They go home with that vacation honeymoon, sort of like starry-eyed, everything's great, it's all high-speed rail. It's a country. It has its rules. It's like moving to any country. It's better to understand that before you jump in and spend even 20 grand, even 10 grand. It's just, there's a learning curve.
I love Japan. I've been here almost 12 years now. I'm not planning on moving anytime soon. It does have its pros and cons, just like anywhere else. There are tons of foreigners traveling right now, especially Westerners. It's kind of crazy, but people are here for a reason. It's Japan's a very interesting country. It's clean, it's efficient. It's not as technologically advanced as some people may think it is, but that's a whole other story. Food's fantastic, so people do come here and they're like, I want a second home. Most of the people, I would say 90% or more of the people that we've been working with have a connection to Japan. They've been here many times. They know the culture. It's like, oh, the first time I came to Japan was in 1997 and blah, blah, blah. And they've got a long history. That's the successful buyer. Not to say that if you came once or twice, you couldn't buy successfully and have fun, but having a history here means a lot.
Yeah, it's hard. The other part of it too is if you think you can get out of something, but with turning it into an Airbnb, that's incredibly difficult to do. You can kind of circumvent that with guest houses and hostel ideas. But if you come in with the idea that, well, if I don't like it, I can Airbnb it, it's kind of impossible due to all the regulations. And really, the whole thing comes down to do your homework, know what you're getting into, and be sure you're really ready to commit before you even start to look for a realtor, honestly. And then once you've done that, it becomes very easy to work with a realtor because you're going to know 100% where you're coming from and what your needs are. And that's going to make the realtor's job much, much easier.
Oh, yeah. Just if someone comes to me like you and how long was our first discussion? It wasn't that long.
No, it was like 30 minutes and I had my notes ready, laid out what I'd been through, my spec. Actually, I'd sent you a long email with probably a dozen houses in 3 wards of Kobe, along with my ideal spec, and then a decision tree on whether or not I would go outside of my spec. And then we had a 30-minute phone call and met up a few days later to go look at a few houses. And thankfully, I got talked down from my position of like, let's do 15.
Not in one day.
I think that's another thing to consider is if you're going to do touring, I'd say 4 to 5 homes per day is about your cognitive limit on remembering what you looked at and being able to, compare it. I strongly recommend bringing some kind of GoPro or something to hold your iPhone, something where you can record the entire tour and also be taking either written or, even just like voice memo notes while you're touring, because you're going to forget. You walk out of the building and be like, oh, I just forgot everything about that.
Yeah, and for the realtor side, 5 is max just because of the keys. And again, we were lucky because they all had lock boxes. Thank God. That makes things so much easier.
I should say we were in one ward, I don't have a ward would be in the like basically one large neighborhood.
Yeah.
And so everything was within a 5 to 10 minute drive. And when I first toured homes in Kobe, I made the mistake of kind of like just shotgunning it. So I was going anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes between, and allowing time to get lost with tight scheduling, it becomes kind of difficult because you can wind up And a lot of these tours can be 10 minutes, and then your next one's 10 minutes away, but you have to, you're either sitting around or you're late.
Yeah, and we help manage that as well, the areas and the timing and how much time we can spend there. I try to schedule at least 1 hour per viewing, per home. Some people want to stay longer. Some people, one home we went in, we were in, and you're like, nope. Yeah. Which is fine. So we were in there much shorter than other homes. But I usually at least 1 hour per home.
Yeah, think a home, if you don't disqualify it right away, to do a good job, even in, let's say, a 5 LDK. 5 LDK is like 5 rooms, living room, kitchen room, dining room. For a 5 LDK to record it, document it well, I'd say that's an hour.
Yeah.
'Cause sometimes you have to open up all the shutters. You need to go around, look in things, under things. So an hour is about right. But like the one house we walked into, I was like, we're done.
Yeah.
It's good to know what your sort of
threshold.
Yeah, what's your threshold? What's your no-go criteria? Because you can look for that right away and then just not waste an hour, just get it off your list.
Yeah, as soon as you walk into a home, you can feel it, right? You're like, nope. And that's kind of my job with people that aren't able to come here, is to kind of get that. And I feel like I'm really good at giving that kind of information. But yeah, and that's why I like to start early as well, because I don't want to be rushed, and I want to be able to take our time at each property. So what do you think the most challenging part of buying here in Japan would be?
I think that's a multi-tier question. It's, at a high level, it's where do I want to live? Like that's figuring out, unless you know already, that's the biggest challenge, is like picking your city, picking your region. And it's also, do I want to live in a city? Do I want to live in a smaller city? Do I want to live in a town? Do I want to be out in the countryside? But then from there, really the most challenging part is getting honestly, it's like finding a good partner, a good realtor to walk you through this. Because otherwise, I've uncovered a lot of pitfalls you can hit that you wouldn't even think were there. And I would have to say that would be the number one challenge, is just finding the right person to get you through. Once you've defined everything on your side, finding the right person to guide you through that can often be a much bigger challenge than the rest, because everything else is internal to you. Finding a partner is external.
Yeah, and that's a lot of people don't understand that. And of course, I'm a sales guy, right? I want to sell our company, but I know who we are. I know what we can do. I know how we do business. I know just having access to Hide is just, he's an expert on real, any question I have, I can ask him. He's going to have the answer. And people don't really understand that, I don't think, about how difficult it is. They're like, well, you charge this for your consultation fee. They don't do this in America. I think that's not right. I'm going to go do it by myself. I'm like, good luck.
I'm 100% DIY whenever I can. And that approach for this was not the right one.
Yeah, again, it's like you try, and you got to, right? That's the only way you're going to learn, but people go out there and try to do it themselves. And a lot of the buyers, they think it's kind of a racist thing where, they're not communicating with me any longer. I'm talking about the Japanese seller side, right? You're trying to communicate directly with them. And it's not because they don't want to communicate with you and they're racist, you're a foreigner, we don't want to sell. Just the language barrier. Yeah, you can do AI in the beginning, but when you get into it, it's just so complicated and there's so many things. You almost have to have somebody who can speak English to translate and make sure you understand the entire process.
Well, it's that, and even if you are at, I don't know, I'll just say N2, like N3, there is so much specialized vocabulary that goes into real estate that it's just not, Google Translate, all that's not going to cut it. And there's also an efficiency thing. It's like, what's your time worth to kind of try to struggle through all these things when you can just, consultation fee is nothing compared to losing 2, 3, 4 weeks of time to mistakes, to misunderstandings, to having to hound a Japanese real estate buyer's agent to get an answer, when just cut it all off, pay the fee, be done with it.
So it's important to get an agent who knows what they're talking about and knows what they're doing, boots on the ground, and it will make your life much, much easier. I promise you that. And again, I know I know our services and what we do, and I'm proud of that because
Yeah.
we have the experience, and that's why I love Hide so much, is because we're not in it for a quick sales. We really truly want to make the best decisions for our clients and buyers. So, we get a good reputation. People come
Yeah.
back to us, and even post-sale stuff we can help out with, right?
Is the post-sale support, which is even once you buy the place, if you were to work directly with, one of the Japanese buyers agencies, they're not going to be able to, or they could. It's going to be a lot harder to communicate your needs because once you buy the place, you're going to have to get your utilities turned on. You're going to have to get cable, your internet scheduled.
Tax representation.
If you want to do any retrofitting or remodeling before you move in, you need to have someone who can help you find and communicate with the contractor and schedule it. It's like I said before, I want a unit bath and want a new bathroom in the building I'm looking at, and having somebody who can facilitate all of that after the sale saves countless hours. Even just the disruption of yet another flight over is worth it.
Absolutely, yeah. And we can help introduce all those kind of services as well, right? And that comes along with the initial fee. Even utilities, right? If you don't have a bank account here, you need a way for someone to pay that on your behalf and then pay them. We have, and these are all the challenges we figured out from the beginning. It's like, okay, here are the challenges that our buyers are having. Either we need to provide a solution or we need to be able to introduce companies that can have the solution, and now we have all that.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I would throw out there, I've probably said this enough times, but it's, you're not just, you can't just come in with, even if you have a budget for the house, you should always pad it out because there's going to be so many other things where you're going to wish you could just throw money at it and get it out of your way. Again, if you're time rich and money poor, you can solve it. But if you're kind of in the bracket where you're looking for, $100,000, $120,000 home, you leave some room to just buy the services you need quickly so that you can get on with everything else that you need to do to be able to move here successfully, get a visa, and manage all the other moving parts of an international move.
Yeah. Because if you're trying to do that, buying the home is just the tip of the iceberg at that point, really.
Yeah. It's honestly, the buying the house part is the least stressful part of this entire process of moving. Between setting up a business, between, undoing, 45 years of life in the U.S. and packing and kind of just figuring out what are we throwing away, what are we keeping, all of it. The rest of it is a much bigger process than just getting a house, which again leads to get a trusted realtor, get someone you can work with easily. So the more stress, you can focus on the harder things. The high level recap is basically do the work first. Same as anything. If you do the work first, you do your homework, if you come in prepared, it becomes much, much easier.
Yeah, exactly. So just again, from my side, being on the agent side, just having someone that has done the homework, has done the research, know what they're getting into. It's like whenever I love researching, right? So if I have a new subject, I don't just read one article. I read 50 articles, right? And then people don't understand that unless you've done it. But if you read one article, oh, I know it. I read 50. Now you just have this overlying knowledge about this subject and you know way more about it and you just dig, oh, what's this? Oh, I found this. Okay, I'm going to dig into there. Same thing with the real estate stuff, which you've obviously done.
I almost think about it like if you wanted to, I would put it down as pretend you're writing like a 50-page paper in college for this, like describing the entire process, whether you're a bullet point person, whether you're a long form, even make yourself a PowerPoint, just like describe the entire process start to finish to yourself, and then you can go back through and fill that in, fill in the gaps of your knowledge, read the 50 articles, read all of Reddit/Japan, whatever it is that you need to do to feel comfortable with your level of information.
Absolutely. And also just timely and quick responses. I really appreciate that. we're getting quite busy. You know, we have a lot of inquiries coming in, so thank you, and we're looking forward to working with you if you're wanting to work with us. But do realize that we are quite busy. As soon as you pay our consultation fee, no pressure to do so, but we're focused on you, right? Yeah. But also in the beginning, you know, people are kind of kicking tires. That's fine. I respond to everybody all the time, but just be responsive and be knowledgeable. And if you can do those two things and cut out all this initial stuff that I usually have to talk about, which I didn't have to for you, thank you very much. It's going to make everybody's life so much easier. So I really appreciate the work you've done and choosing to work with us. And, you know, we're here for you post sales anytime. You can reach out anytime. We'll do what we can.
Again, that post sales support is, you know, 50% of the picture.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, something that a lot of people don't understand or even think about, right? So
yeah.
Great. Yeah. Anything else?
No, that's it.
Thank you, Jeremy, so much. Standard and Strange.
Yeah, Standard and Strange. Is drop the URL in the notes.
Absolutely, yeah. Standard and Strange. He's got 3 boutiques in America, some pretty cool clothing, I think, of which he's wearing right now.
Yeah, all of it.
Yeah, all of it, right? So check it out. Thank you so much, Jeremy. And, you know, reach out with any questions in the comments. If you have anything you want to ask us, let us know, and we'll definitely respond. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you very much for watching. If you made it to the end, I really appreciate it. Again, we're a licensed real estate agent here in Japan. Reach out through my email or WhatsApp, and we can set up a free consultation to talk about your needs. Thank you very much, and have a great day.